A Dutch court convicts 2 Russians and a Ukrainian man in the Downing of flight MH17 that killed 289 people in 2014. You're watching Aljazeera live from a headquarters in Doha. I'm Darine Abu Gheda. Also coming up, the UK hikes taxes for higher earners and energy companies. The finance minister says the country's in recession, which will deepen next year. More Russian strikes hit cities across Ukraine, the latest in a series of attacks on energy infrastructure. And the impact of climate change in Madagascar, millions of people affected as the country faces its 5th consecutive year of drought. Hello, a court in Amsterdam has sentenced 3 men to life imprisonment for the Downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 in 2014. The passenger jet was flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur when it was shot down over eastern Ukraine. All 298 people on board were killed. The convicted are 2 Russian former intelligence officers and a Ukrainian separatist leader. They are fugitives believed to be in Russia.
On 17th of July 2014, the injured parties were suddenly faced with the death of 1 or more loved ones as a result of the MH17 crash. It is incredibly hard to take for the injured parties that they must live with the ongoing uncertainty of what must have happened in the last moments in the aircraft and to what extent their relatives and loved ones were aware of their fate.
Let's bring in Step Vassen. She's joining us from Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands. Tell us more about how this verdict was reached, Step, and the reaction to it.
Well, it was quite an emotional verdict for the hundreds of relatives that had traveled to Amsterdam, some as far as from Australia. Even though most of the victims on the plane were Dutch, there were 16 nationalities on board of MH17 when it was shot down over eastern Ukraine. The judge said he had no doubt whatsoever that what the investigators had found and also what the prosecutors had brought to trial, that the plane was shot down by a Buk missile from separatist, pro-Russian separatist area. That was what happened to the plane. And also the 3 suspects, former Russian officers, were involved and responsible for the transport of the Buk to that location. One of the suspects was acquitted because the judge said there was no evidence, no clear evidence that his role was also involvement in this transport of the Buk. For the relatives who have been in a real suffering, according to the judge, for these past 8 years, this was quite a great relief that there's now a guilty verdict. And I'm joined by one of these relatives. It's Piet Ploeg. He has lost 3 of his relatives, his brother Alex, his wife, and also a nephew. So he's here with me. How did you experience this verdict?
This was, of course, quite emotional. But, you know, it was a well-considered, well-balanced, well-motivated verdict from the court. And the role of the Russian state is confirmed by the court. The book system was a Russian book system. It was fired from a separatist area. So this was very important for us. And the 3 highest-ranking officers, they got a lifelong sentence. So yes, what do you want more?
It was groundbreaking in the sense that the role of Russia was explicitly detailed by the judge. How important was that for you?
Very, very important. You know, when a country is responsible for facilitating the shooting down of an airplane, it can't be so that they can get away with it. And they have to be held accountable in public. And that's what happened today.
The judge sounded emotional when he was talking about the fact that the suspects didn't show any respect, he said, also for the trial. Also, of course, we haven't seen them here. They haven't attended the trial. Does it still give you that sense of justice?
Yes, of course. I also saw that the suspects were quite indifferent. Quite indifferent, very indifferent. They didn't care at all. And that's why this verdict is so important, so that an impartial Dutch court find them guilty. And I know they won't go to jail, but the world knows now who is responsible for the downing of flight MH17. It's so very important for us.
Is this now an end for you? Is this the closure you've been looking for 8 years?
No, because we are not ready yet. There's still an investigation going on to the crew of the book and the higher ranking people who are involved. We get to hear more about that, I hope, in the beginning of next year. There are also proceedings at the European Court of Human Rights and ICAO. So for me and the foundation, we'll keep busy the coming years.
Thank you so much for joining us here live on Al Jazeera. We have still to hear from the prosecutor, because there was one person acquitted, if there will be an appeal. And also, even though they haven't attended a trial or have shown any interest in this court case, the 3 people who have now been convicted, who are probably in Russia, have also still a right to appeal. And we will have to hear from them or in the next coming weeks.
All right, thank you so much. Step faster. To the UK now, where the Finance Minister, Jeremy Hunt, has officially declared that his nation is in a recession. He expects the economy to shrink even further in the next fiscal year. Hunt has laid out his plans for tackling rising inflation. Rory Challenge reports.
For weeks, Jeremy Hunt has been playing the plain-speaking medic for the UK's economic malaise. Like root canal surgery, the treatment he's warned of won't be pleasant, but he insists it's necessary, and the moment has come.
In the face of unprecedented global headwinds, families, pensioners, businesses, teachers, nurses and many others are worried about the future. So today we deliver a plan to tackle the cost of living crisis and rebuild our economy.
Jeremy Hunt's $66 billion plan increases taxes and cuts government spending. But though the tax rises will come now, most spending cuts are deferred till 2025, after the next election. To help soften the blows, state pensions and benefits will rise in line with inflation, and the national living wage will rise too. It's the new Chancellor's attempt to clear the wreckage left by his predecessor's mini-budgets of just 6 weeks ago. Kwasi Kwarteng sent the pound plunging and interest rates soaring, with billions in unfunded tax cuts. It cost Kwarteng and previous Prime Minister Liz Truss their jobs. Jeremy Hunt is trying to be a safer pair of hands.
He's trying to make the case that the Conservative Party is going to generate fiscal credibility for the country, but not damage public services too badly with another round of austerity. So he's kept, in cash terms, spending the same over the next 2 years and pushed back the pain to 2025 for the next election. So a bit of a trap for the Labour Party.
The reality of the situation is that Britons will have less money in their pockets as the country enters recession. Even in the wealthy English town of Saffron Walden, the need for food banks is soaring.
The cost of living crisis and the impending recession are going to affect people from all types of society. And what we find is that when you live somewhere affluent, if you are struggling, the poverty here, it's hidden and it's invisible.
Sophie says demand for food is outstripping the amount they receive. Does she see any light down the tunnel?
No, definitely not. No light at all.
The Chancellor says global financial pressures are a storm that Britain must face into. But whether the origins are foreign or domestic, the UK is entering a new age of austerity. Rory Challenge, Al Jazeera.
Ukraine says Russia is targeting critical facilities across several cities in a new wave of missile strikes. At least 2 people have been killed in overnight strikes. President Volodymyr Zelensky posted this video footage, apparently shot from a car camera, of a blast in the central city of Dnipro. There are reports of explosions in the southern port of Odessa and capital Kyiv. Several cities have reported blackouts as Russia stepped up its attacks on Ukrainian energy facilities in recent weeks. And a deal that ensured safe passage of millions of tons of grain from Ukraine has been extended by 120 days. The agreement, brokered by the UN and Turkey, allowed grain shipments through the Black Sea. It's been in place since July and was set to expire this week. Jonah Hull has more from Kyiv.
It wasn't clear until the very last minute whether Russia would agree to renew the deal in talks brokered by Turkey, bringing in the UN as well as Russia and Ukraine. But this afternoon, first the Ukrainians confirming it, and then the UN and Turkey doing so as well. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, talking about a triumph of discreet diplomacy, he said, in finding multilateral solutions. President Erdogan of Turkey confirming that the deal will be extended by 120 days from Saturday on its current terms, no change to those terms. Hailing the deal, he said, talking about the 11 million tonnes of grain that had been transported in nearly 500 shipments in the last 4 months of the first phase of the deal. He said it is a deal that is important and beneficial for the world's food and security supply.
The Polish President Andrzej Duda has visited the site of Tuesday's missile strike at a town near the Ukrainian border. Tensions ran high after the hit killed 2 people in a village. Indications are it could have been a Ukrainian air defense missile. Both Poland and NATO say the strike was not intentional. Asad Beg has more from the Polish border town.
We're in the Polish village of Shuvadev, just kilometers away from the Ukrainian border. This is the site where 2 people were killed when a missile landed on a farm. Now, President Andrzej Duda has visited, he's offered his condolences and support to the local community, but also ensured them that the investigation is ongoing and will be thorough. But this has come as a major shock for people here in this community. They've been used to the war taking place on the other side of the border. They've been used to seeing an increase of people crossing that border and the traffic, but they didn't think that something like this would happen.
Obviously, when it comes to the 2 villages, the 2 places where the 2 men who were killed, the situation is quite difficult. They were very much liked within the community, and it touched people there very much. What's more important is the awareness that this rocket could have fallen on any other direction either side, and it could have killed any of us.
So far, the Ukrainians are adamant that it wasn't one of their missiles from the air defense system that struck Poland, but a Russian one. President Zelensky says he has spoken to his air command, and those discussions have taken place in private, but Ukraine wants to be a part of the investigation and hand over evidence. But what the Ukrainians are saying is contrary to what we're hearing from the Polish here, the United States and NATO. You say that it's unlikely that it was a Russian missile, but more likely that it was one from the Ukrainian air defense. But we are waiting to see the results of the investigation. But even if it was a Russian missile, there seems to be a consensus that it was not an intentional attack by Russia against Poland, who is a NATO member.
In Iran, strikes are continuing for the 3rd consecutive day on the 3rd anniversary of anti-government protests that followed fuel price increases. On Wednesday, at least 7 people were killed, including a 10-year-old child in the southern city of Izeh. That's after gunmen opened fire at a bazaar. Officials are calling it a terrorist attack, but protesters say security forces opened fire on them as they were gathering to demonstrate. Dorsa Jabari has more from Tehran.
The demonstrations have intensified here since Tuesday, when calls were made for people to go on strike to commemorate what is known as Bloody November that took place in 2019, where hundreds were killed, according to human rights groups, at the hands of security forces here. Since last night, in the past 24 hours, it's been one of the deadliest in the country. At least 15 people have been killed in various incidents across the country. And we just heard from officials that another 2 security forces have been killed in the city of Mashhad, that is Iran's 2nd biggest city in the country. This has certainly now become a very serious situation in the country, and it's one of the most serious the country has witnessed over the past 24 hours since the protests began about 9 weeks ago after the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. What the officials are saying is that those businesses that have been closed have been forced to close by various elements that have been present inside the country. Many of the private businesses that I've spoken to say they've chosen to close for 3 days now. What will happen in the next few days remains to be seen. What is clear is that there is a tremendous amount of tension across the country, and security officials have said that they have arrested a number of people that have been charged with inciting unrest and linking them to various terrorist groups.
Republicans have won 218 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. This gives them just enough to control the chamber, with 6 other seats still being counted. The Democrats have 211 seats so far. President Joe Biden has congratulated the Republicans and promised to work with them. But this win in the midterm elections could give them leverage to block his agenda. Let's bring in Shihab Ratansi joining us from Washington, D.C. So they've won the House, Shihab, but infighting seems to be escalating amongst Republicans. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of consensus that one of the reasons why the Republicans didn't do as well as they probably should have in the midterms is because so many independent voters and swing voters were alienated by the antics of the Make America Great Again Trump wing of the party. But the irony is, because the Republicans have such a narrow majority in the House, it's exactly that same wing now that has enormous amounts of leverage over the establishment wing of the party. So we don't even know whether the current minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, for example, will have enough votes to become Speaker of the House in January when the new session begins. And so he's having to bend over backwards to try and please that side of the party. But that then may and is alienating parts of the establishment wing of the party. And the question is, how far will he have to go to retain their support, to have some semblance of governance within his own caucus? And will that then turn off the same swing voters and independent voters in 2024 at the next round of elections? So these are the issues being wrestled with currently, because that side of the party is saying, look, we want to impeach Joe Biden, we want to impeach the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and so on. I mean, is that what it's all going to be about? What the new incoming majority will have, though, is the power to investigate the Biden administration, as the Democrats did into the Trump administration when they had the majority in the House. We're already hearing some of some of the lines of inquiry that are coming out. Notably, we just had a press conference where those on the Oversight Committee are saying we're going to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden's business dealings. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that Hunter Biden was using Joe Biden's position as vice president to make a lot of money. The question is, for the incoming House Oversight Committee, how much did Biden know? What did these foreign donors and people, who paid a lot of money to Hunter Biden want in return for that money, and so on? So, perfectly legitimate lines of inquiry for committees, but this is what we're going to see, though, is lots of House committees, lots of investigations into the Biden administration, trying to make life as difficult as possible for Joe Biden, and not much legislation actually being passed.
All right, and just briefly, Shihab, we understand that we expect to hear from the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in the next hour or so, who's meant to be addressing her future plans. What are we expecting her to say?
I mean, she promised that she would step down in 2022 as Speaker of the House, but because the Democrats did better than expected in the House, she has that leverage, and she's clearly loving. You see that this is a person who really loves power, because her aides have told everyone, look, she had two versions of her speech that she went home with last night. We don't know what she's going to do. Will she step down? Won't she step down? She loves the power, clearly. If she doesn't step down, there'll be a lot of people in the younger generation of Democrats who'll be pretty miffed, but she does have the say-so now. She can say, no, in fact, I do want to stay, and there's very little that anyone can do about it. And this isn't an ideological change, it's a generational change that some are calling for. It'll still be that right-wing corporate wing of the party, the Democratic Party, that's firmly in control. But the question is it time for a new generation of leadership for the Democrats in the House? Yeah, all right. Thank you so much. Shihab Ratansi reporting from Capitol Hill. The UN is celebrating the 50th anniversary of its World Heritage Sites program. UNESCO's convention was designed to help protect cultural properties, and an international conference is underway in Greece. John Soropoulos has more from Delphi.
In ancient times, this remote place on Mount Parnassus in central Greece became the most important oracle. This is where city-states would send emissaries to find out what they should do when they were faced with difficult decisions, such as whether to wage war. It is here that the Athenians sent heralds to ask whether they should fight the Persians at what later became their triumphs at the battles of Marathon and Salamis in the 5th century BC. The Pythia, the priestess who lived in the Temple of Apollo behind me, would become ecstatic by breathing in burnt laurel leaves, and she would utter various phrases that priests would later interpret and write down for those emissaries. And here also the people of Delphi lived, attending the theatre above us and attending the Delphic Games, which were as famous in antiquity as the Olympic Games that took place every 4 years. For all of these reasons, the UNESCO organization has named Delphi one of its key World Heritage Sites, and it chose this place to announce on Thursday that it was also trying to broaden in the next phase of its history the mixture of sites to include more African sites among the World Heritage List. So it is going to invite 12 countries among the smaller and less wealthy African countries to go through the application process and gradually by 2030 list at least a dozen of their sites in the World Heritage List, which already numbers almost 1,200 sites worldwide.
Water supply for the world's poor is a major issue at this year's UN COP27 negotiations. Millions of people in Madagascar are facing their 5th consecutive year of drought, as Nick Clark reports.
We're driving through Madagascar's Grand Sud. It's supposed to be the rainy season, but the fields are bone dry. This is the footprint of climate change. 1 year of drought is bad enough, but 5 in a row is near impossible. Fierce hot winds turn the soil to dust. Crops stand no chance. In the village of Irada, like everywhere, it's a struggle for survival. Water and how to get it is on everyone's minds. Then suddenly it appears from nowhere. A water tanker en route for a far-off destination has stopped, and from its leaking pipes there's a rare chance. Every can, container and bottle hands can be laid on is filled. Quick, they say, or the cart will go.
If you ever needed a demonstration of just how desperate people are, this is it.
This is very heartbreaking because normally those kids should play. Those kids should live their childhood. But right now they are running after water. If you are looking at that kind of landscape, you can feel how hard the situation is here in this region. And this is literally everywhere in this region.
Nearby, amongst fields once filled with maize and sweet potatoes, lies a village waterhole. It's been dry for 2 years.
That's why people are thirsty and they can't do anything about it. There's no cassava, there's no maize. There are no crops at all, and life is very, very difficult. Our daily life in the village is about rain, but right now there's nothing. We're really suffering.
Heading back, we stop at a roadside market. The main commodity for sale, water.
It's got to the stage now where water traders have set up and they're selling water at the side of the road as a commodity. Each one of these jerry cans costs about 50 cents and they're bought by people who perhaps don't have the wherewithal to go to the river themselves. The thing is, even 50 cents is too much for most.
The poor grow up fast here, scavenging for survival. This is the human face of our changing climate. Developed countries stalling on finance for nations like Madagascar would do well to look into those eyes. Nick Clark, Aljazeera, Irada, Madagascar.